Hey everyone, welcome to the channel where I share creepy and scary stories that will give you chills. If you love horror and spooky tales, make sure to subscribe and join me every week for a new story. Let's get into the dark side together. Red Lake was a kind of town that didn't show up on most maps. Tucked between cold mountain ridges and silent pine forests, it was a place where time didn't bother to move forward. A diner, a gas station, a church, and a dozen wooden houses with cracked paint and whispering windows. The sort of place where even the wind seemed to tiptoe. Grace Bellamy stepped off the bus with her camera bag over one shoulder and a steel thermos of cold coffee in her hand. She blinked at the sunlight, sharp and pale, and drew in the first breath of Red Lake's air, pine dust, and something else. Something old. "Looks like you brought the city with you," said a voice. She turned to see a man leaning against a rusting pickup truck, arms folded, a smirk on his face. "Nathan Krill," he said. "You must be Grace." "I am. Thanks for the pickup," she replied, adjusting her bag. Nathan was in his mid-30s, stubble on his jaw, sunglasses hanging from his collar. "Welcome to the edge of nowhere." Grace gave a tight smile. Perfect place to film ghosts. They drove through town, passing weather-worn buildings and long-abandoned storefronts. Grace filmed everything. The silence, the stillness, the emptiness. Even at midday, Red Lake felt vacated. Nathan glanced at her in the mirror. "So why here?" "I'm filming Forgotten Places," she replied. Red Lake came up in a chat forum. Someone said it had a history. Disappearances, voices in the woods, sinking roads. You're kind of tourist bait. Nathan chuckled. Tourist bait that eats the tourists. That night, she stayed in an old boarding house on Ashfield Lane. Her room smelled like mothballs and wet stone. The floor creaked when she shifted her weight. From the window, she could see the forest line, dark, silent, heavy. She filmed her first video log. Day 1 in Red Lake. Small town. Cold people. Big silences. Something doesn't feel right. Not yet sure what. I'll start with the church and the town hall tomorrow. Maybe talk to the sheriff. She paused. Looked toward the corner of the room. Also, I keep hearing footsteps in the hallway. No one else has checked in. Landlady says I'm alone. She turned off the camera. And then she heard the scratching. Faint, rhythmic, wet, as if fingernails were tracing wood. It came from the floorboards beneath her bed. Scratching. Grace froze. The sound came again, deliberate, slow, like something alive brushing the underside of the wooden floor. She leaned forward, eyes narrowed, heart pushing against her ribs. The old boarding house was supposed to be empty. Her room was the only one rented. That's what the landlady said. She got up carefully and lowered her camera to the floor. Nothing, just the same boards, warped from age, cold against her skin. But the noise hadn't stopped, it had only moved. Now it was near the door. Grace stepped back. The scratching rose, no longer timid. It became desperate, a flurry of claws against wood, and then it stopped. Complete silence. Grace remained still, holding her breath like it might protect her. Then a voice, a whisper, from under the floor. "Hello." She recoiled. The voice was distant, muffled, but unmistakably human. She didn't sleep that night. Morning arrived like an apology. Light poured into the cracked curtains and made the room feel human again. Nathan arrived with coffee and a tired grin. "You look like hell," he said. "I think I heard someone beneath the floorboards," she replied, brushing hair from her face. Scratching. Whispering. Nathan raised a brow. "This place is rats. Old house. Probably the wind." Grace shook her head. It wasn't wind. He watched her for a moment. "You're recording, right?" She nodded. "Good. If you're lucky, whatever it is will show up. If not, maybe it's just Red Lake introducing itself." Their first stop was a church. St. Clement stood like a sentinel at the top of a hill. Its bell tower leaned slightly, as if weary. The front doors were open, revealing dust-choked pews and stained glass windows faded from time. They stepped inside. The smell of mildew and candle wax clung to everything. Grace filmed quietly. Nathan walked down the aisle, gaze flicking across the altar, then to the heavy trapdoor just behind it. "Used to be a crypt down there," he said. "They sealed it up years ago. Too many accidents." Accidents. People falling, breaking bones. Some said they heard voices when they went down. He met her eyes. Red Lake's full of voices. If you listen long enough. Grace focused her camera on the trapdoor. The edges were sealed with iron nails. She zoomed in on something just beside it. Faint scratches on the floor, radiating outward like claws had tried to get out. She said nothing. Outside, the air felt colder. They walked to the town archive building, now a half-abandoned brick structure next to the post office. Inside, rows of filing cabinets stood like tombstones. Dust covered everything. Grace found the local obituaries. Nathan watched her silently as she sifted through names, dates, and headlines. James Harrow, found hanging in woods. 1997. Darla Quinn, drowned in her own bathtub. 1998. Harold Finch, eyes removed, no forced entry. 2002. Angela Reese, claimed he told me to jump. Jumped. 2007. All listed as accidents. All within 10 years. All with the same footnote. No foul play suspected. Nathan's voice was quiet. There's more, but not all of them are written down. Grace met his eyes. Who's he? Nathan looked toward the window. The one who talks beneath the town. Would you like to continue with Chapter 3? Busikil de Iloletics Haikai Durinlsesik v. Jerilim Katlanarak Bayuyasek. Harika, Jerilim Bayur, Kasabas a Sizzlegen Isen Kuramai Devamederken. Burse Uyanyer. Grace repeated the words in her mind as they stepped outside the archive building. The air had grown colder, as if the town itself disapproved of what they were learning. Nathan didn't say much after that. He walked ahead, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders tense. Grace's camera caught a flicker. She paused the video. Rewound. There, between two frames, was a figure in the alley behind the building. Tall, thin, no features, just absence. When she looked again, it was gone. They spent the afternoon interviewing the locals. Most were tight-lipped. Some shut their doors at the sight of a camera. But one man, Father Wren, the church's former priest, agreed to speak, on the condition that it not be filmed. They met him in his home, a small, cluttered cottage at the edge of the pine woods. "I left the church 10 years ago," he said, voice low and dry. "Something came through the stone. Something we weren't meant to understand." Grace leaned forward. "You mean through the crypt?" He nodded. "I heard it speak. Not in words. Not like we're speaking now. It speaks in shapes, in movements. It crawls inside the mind and uses your thoughts like hands." Nathan sat stiffly beside her. Father Wren continued, eyes unfocused. The first was a child. She said she had dreams of a man with no face who danced in the dark. She said he told her secrets. Secrets about the people in town. Then one day, she jumped into the lake. Ice cold. Didn't even scream. He reached for a small cross hanging from his neck and gripped it tightly. It doesn't live in the church. It lives below, in the soil, in the old tunnels, the ones from the war. It feeds on belief. That night, Grace sat in her room and reviewed the footage. When she paused the video of the archive alley again, the figure was still there, only now it had moved closer. And the second she pressed pause, the floorboard behind her cracked. She turned around fast, camera trembling in her grip. No one there, but something had been there. She rewound the footage a few seconds. The figure was standing directly behind her, just out of frame, its form a distortion in the static. And as she stared, the footage began to glitch on its own. A low whisper bled to the speakers. "Down." Just one word. The next morning, Grace was gone. Nathan found her camera on the bed, still recording. The lens pointed to the door, wide open. Footsteps in the dust let out, and then vanished. No one saw her leave. No one heard anything, except the landlady. She claimed she woke up at 3:33 a.m. and heard someone laughing from underneath the house. But when she looked, there was only silence and the faint scent of pine. Vanished. Grace was simply gone. Nathan paced the edge of her room, her camera still recording in his hands. The timestamp blinked steadily. 7:13 a.m. Her bag was still by the bed, untouched. Her notes were left open, a page circled in red ink. The thing beneath does not kill. It replaces. Nathan read it 3 times. It didn't make sense. Grace wouldn't just walk off without her camera. Not without him. He checked the footage again. The figure, the same faceless silhouette. This time, closer. So close it looked like it was reaching for her shoulder, then gone in a single frame. No door opening. No movement. Just a flicker. He called the sheriff, but there was no answer. So he drove. The streets were too quiet for a Thursday. No kids playing. No dogs barking. Curtains drawn. He passed a diner. The windows fog and the open sign flickering. No one inside. At the church, the doors were shut tight. A crow stood on the steeple and watched him with glossy black eyes. Nathan parked by the town hall. Inside, he found Sheriff Bellamy, slumped at his desk, face pale, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Dead. No blood. No wound. But something was off about his face. Nathan leaned closer. The sheriff's mouth was stretched wider than humanly possible. Lips cracked, teeth exposed, as if someone had pried his face into a smile and left it that way. On the desk was a note. One word, scratched into paper over and over again. Dance. Nathan ran, out of the building, into the street. And there, across the road, stood Grace. But it wasn't Grace. She was too still, too clean. Her eyes were open, staring directly at him. He didn't call her name. He didn't move. She smiled, or something wore her smile, and then turned, walking slowly down the alley behind the general store. The same alley from the glitch. Nathan followed. Down the alley, around the bend, past the rotting crates and broken signs. But it was empty. Only the wind, whispering against the bricks. And then the whisper again, down. Beneath a pile of crates, he found an old metal grate. Rusted, bolted, but something under was breathing. He could hear it. And something whispered again, this time with Grace's voice. Nathan, he's waiting. Down. The word echoed in Nathan's skull, like a bell rung too close to the ear. He knelt beside the grate, fingers brushing rust and rotting wood. The breath below was faint, shallow and rhythmic, as though something enormous was sleeping just beneath the skin of the town. Grace's voice again, softer now. He's waiting. Nathan didn't hesitate. He pulled out the crowbar from the trunk of his pickup and began wrenching the bolts loose. Each one screamed in protest, metal biting metal, until the grate finally came free with a groan. Darkness greeted him. A hole, wide enough for a man to squeeze through, led into black. He clicked on his flashlight. Stairs. Stone, old and damp, descended into the earth. And at the bottom, movement. Not fast, not wild, just the subtle twitch of something waiting. He climbed in. The air was different below. Thicker. It smelled of iron, wet moss, and wax. The walls were marked with old war symbols. Some recognizable, others twisted into unreadable spirals. The passage sloped deeper, and Nathan's flashlight flickered with each breath he took. He passed rooms. Old bunkers. Storage units. All long abandoned, but not empty. In one room, broken mannequins, seated neatly in rows, each missing its face. In another, mirrors. Dozens of them, all facing each other. And in the center, a single chair, strapped. Then a voice. Nathan. He spun. Grace, or something that wore her face. She stood at the end of the hallway, her eyes pitch black, her smile too wide. He needed a doorway. Nathan stepped back. Grace took a step forward. And you opened it. He turned and ran. Down another hall, up crumbling steps, through a shattered door into what looked like a control room. Maps, switches, monitors long dead. On the wall was a mural. A man dangling from strings like a marionette, his face missing, hands stretched upward toward an unseen puppeteer. And beneath the mural, scrawled in black paint, "Believe, obey, dance." Nathan backed away. The monitors sparked to life. One showed the church. Another, the alley behind the archive. Another, his own face, staring back at him through the grainy feed. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a figure. Tall, faceless, arms out like a conductor leading an orchestra. Nathan turned, but the room was empty. Then came the strings. Thin, black tendrils dropped from the ceiling, slow and silent. They hovered in the air like smoke until they lunged. One wrapped around his wrist. Another, his throat. He screamed, and the power cut out. Darkness swallowed everything. Ash! It clung to Nathan's hands, to Grace's hair, to the back of their throats. Even miles from Red Lake, the residue of that underground chamber followed them like smoke after a fire. They walked for hours. Neither spoke. When they finally reached the edge of a neighboring town, Coldwater, the streets were still. Not abandoned. Not empty. Just quiet. Too quiet. A single pickup drove past without stopping. A man inside stared at them without blinking. Grace turned to Nathan. He saw it. I could tell. Nathan nodded. It's not just Red Lake. They found a diner, open but hollow. The waitress smiled too much. The coffee tasted metallic. And on the wall, behind the register, hung a framed photo of a harvest festival. People laughing, waving. Nathan stared at the image. In the background, barely visible, was the shape of a string, stretching upward into nothing. Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat on the motel bed, scrolling through footage she didn't remember recording. The camera had kept filming after she was taken. Somewhere in the static, something blinked, paused, rewound. There, a frame, half-second long, of Nathan. But he wasn't holding the camera. He was looking into it. And behind him was her, tied up, mouth open in a scream. She rewound again. The image was gone, replaced by a black screen and 2 words. He remembers. Nathan sat outside, watching the stars. He felt different, lighter, but not freer, more like hollowed. He reached the scar on his shoulder, the place where the string had wrapped around him. The skin was cold, numb. He pressed harder, and something beneath the flesh twitched. The next morning, Grace was gone again. But this time, her bag was missing. So was the footage. So was the flare. Nathan checked the front desk. The clerk shrugged, said no one had come or gone all night. But in Grace's bed, he found something. A puppet, hand-carved, wooden, its arms tied to black thread. Its face was hers. Reflection. Nathan stood in front of the motel mirror, the puppet in his hand. Its joints creaked when he moved it, and as he did, his shoulder tensed. The same shoulder, the one with the scar. He stared at himself in the mirror, the puppet in one hand, the other hand shaking. He raised the puppet's arm. His own arm rose a second later, delayed, just slightly. He tried again, raised the puppet's head. His own chin jerked up. No, he dropped it to the floor, stepping back. But in the mirror, his reflection didn't follow. It just smiled. Nathan drove, out of Coldwater, toward the mountains, anywhere, but the road signs kept changing. Every hour, he passed a rusted sign that said, "Welcome to Red Lake." He stopped at a gas station. The attendant didn't speak. He handed Nathan change with a blank stare, and between his fingers, a string dangled from the ceiling, just hanging. That night, Nathan dreamed. He was in the chamber again. The strings dangled like vines, pulsing with breath. Grace stood before him, but she was broken, arms twisted, head cocked unnaturally. Her voice was wrong, echoing. He doesn't control everyone, just the ones who want to control in the first place. Then her mouth unhinged. From it poured smoke. From the smoke came fingers, and from the fingers came puppets. One by one, they dropped to the floor, each carved with the face of someone he knew. The sheriff, Father Wren, Grace, himself. Then the last puppet hit the ground, faceless. It raised its head and whispered, I've always been you. Nathan woke screaming, but not in a bed, not in a room. He was back in the church. Red Lake's church. The pews were dust-covered, the candles burned, and across the altar hung a tapestry that hadn't been there before. A massive figure, strings descending from its hands like divine beams, guiding the townspeople below. And in its chest, sewn into its flesh, was a familiar face. His own. The door slammed shut. Whispers returned. The air tasted like ash again. And above the altar, descending from the rafters, came a marionette, larger than before. Wooden, but breathing. Its face flickered. From Grace himself to Father ran and back. Then it spoke, in all their voices at once. You left the door open. Control. Nathan didn't scream this time. He didn't run. He simply stared at the marionette as it swayed above the altar, strings stretching infinitely into the ceiling. The voices, his graces, Wren's, even the sheriff's, collided into a choir madness. You left the door open. You cut the strings. You became the hand. The puppet descended slowly. Nathan didn't move. His hands hung limp at his sides, fingers twitching on their own. His shoulder, numb since the chamber, pulsed like it remembered something he didn't. The puppet smiled. Then it mirrored him, perfectly. Head tilt, finger twitch, blink. Nathan reached forward. So did it. They touched. For a second, the world blinked. When it returned, he was standing inside the puppet. Or perhaps it was inside him. He stood in the church, but the walls were bleeding light. Reality thinned. Voices screamed from every angle. Not real. Not him. He's just a shell. Pull the string. Watch him dance. Then came a cracking sound from his chest. He looked down. A single black thread now stretched from his heart, climbing up into the rafters. Above, the string shimmered. A presence watched. It didn't need form. It had him. And just as he began to lose consciousness, he saw Grace at the back of the church. Real, alive, holding a blade. She ran forward, screaming his name, slashed the air, not at him, but at the string. It snapped, and Nathan collapsed. He woke in a field. Dawn again, but not Red Lake. Cold grass, clear skies, birds. Grace sat nearby, breathing hard. You were almost gone, she whispered. You let it in. Nathan didn't reply, because something was still inside him. He could feel it. Later, as they reached the edge of another town, a radio blared from a parked car. Unusual string-like phenomena reported across 3 counties. Residents advised to remain indoors. Grace looked at him. He said nothing, and from the mirror of the car, his reflection winked. Epilogue, threadbare. Weeks later, somewhere else, a child finds an old puppet at a flea market. Cracked, dusty. They pull on the strings. It smiles. Not carved, not painted. It just smiles.